Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
Welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. This is Kisma. Nick is off today. He's out teaching energy mastery, and I am flying solo, which is kind of exciting, but Nick will be back next time. And as I mentioned before, oftentimes the tech work makes me a little nervous. So he set it all up. Very grateful to him. And the reason that I am doing this without Nick is it's the one time that a very, very special human could be on the show. And I didn't want to miss this opportunity. And our guest today is Chris Winfield. Chris is, he is a super connector. And as far as I'm concerned, he's like a super conductor of positivity. He's known as the media matchmaker. He's also the creator of an experience that is called the Unfair Advantage, which I've been to twice, and I highly recommend. Chris is a columnist for Time, Business Insider, Inc., and an editor at large for Thrive Global. So, Chris, welcome. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I always love talking to you.
Well, it's so funny because the first time I saw you speak was almost a year ago. I don't know if you remember the 90-day year with Todd Herman. I know Todd's a good friend of yours. He's a dear mentor of mine. And you walked on stage holding a can of Red Bull and you had like jeans on and you had like kind of a cool t-shirt and a hoodie and you just laid it down. And then you made fun of our friend Matthew Kimberly's British accent, which at that moment I was like, I am forever going to follow this guy. I don't know who he is and where he came from, but he's awesome. So I don't know if you remember that, but it was such a great.
Of course I do. I love everything. So Todd is, as you mentioned, is a really close friend of mine, and that I'd helped him a lot with just I wanted to have him make that event so special. And, my thing is like, if I'm going to show up for something, I want to completely show up in whatever way. And also just always give it to people as straight as I possibly can.
Yeah. Well, that you do. And it's a real gift. And I know the reason that I've gone to your events and followed you is we're really in this world of noise, especially for those listening that are entrepreneurs or, working on building a business. There's so much information. There's so much information for everyone out there. I believe that the statistics are people get more information in one day than our parents did in a lifetime.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks to Google and everything out there. So for you, giving that direct message and having that clarity in your voice, what do you do to make that happen?
Well, I think it comes from trying to always put myself in someone else's shoes, so to speak. So it's interesting because I think one of the things that we connect so much on is listening to our own intuition and, something. For me, that means something greater than me. And also, like, I feel like I always know, or like God, the universe, like always knows what's right for me. And so oftentimes, honestly, all I'm doing is asking people questions that they already know the answers to. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, so not always, but many times it just comes across as being very specific. I'm just asking people to answer their own questions. And often the reason I do that is just like you were talking about, that there's so much information. But when we get into like the entrepreneur space, the online space, the coaching space, the expert space, there's so much, especially because of Facebook, Instagram, courses, all these things.
Right.
There's so much information and there's so many people thinking they have to do things a certain way because somebody else is. And that is just something that I feel like it's part of my mission, is to help people get back in tune with what they know is right for them. And I think that that's what I'm constantly looking to do, is just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And because I never want people, I lived a lot of my life doing things that didn't make me happy because I wanted it to be how it appeared on the outside or whatever. So my goal is to have as few people as possible, or as many as I can help, to not live that way.
Mm.
I think it keeps coming back to that mission for me.
I love that. It's like a force fit. And, what I see being an entrepreneur and I've been doing something, selling something, teaching something since I was 14 years old. There are these boxes that people will say, you've got to fit in this, you've got to do this system, you've got to coach like this or train like this. And it's almost soul crushing. I know that there's relevant and excellent information out there. Yet what you describe is this ability to get to that divine spark inside of each person, so that whatever they're doing, they have their own flavor to it. Does that make sense?
I think part of it is just giving people permission to listen to themselves and listen to what's right for them, and that's really what it comes down to. And when I say permission, it's not saying that I'm the one who needs to give you permission, because who the hell am I? But it's more about that. If somebody looks at me as like somebody who has influence or whatever, like I want to give that back to them, to say like, all right, it's not about like what I think is right for you. I'll have my opinions, but it's more about oftentimes what is really right, what feels right. Because the thing that I've found is that the more I'm in touch and in tune with what's right, what's good for me overall, the easier everything else is. The more I'm in flow, the happier I am. The happier I am, the more I'm in flow, the more money I'm going to make, the more people I'm going to help, the more. And, my goal, it's really simple each day, is to just help one person. That's it. Like, hopefully each day I can help more. But that's the way I'm always thinking, is like, all right, I just want to help one person today. That's my goal in the morning. And the reason for that is because even if I'm just helping one person, if I make one person's life a little bit better, give them a little bit more clarity, I know that I am going to exponentially reach a whole bunch of other people, because I'm really there's one of my favorite quotes is the Jim Rohn quote, where it says, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So my thinking is, if I'm able to help one person, I know that they're going to be helping at least 5. Not even directly. It can be indirectly, because like if I make somebody a little bit happier, a little bit better, a little bit more sure, a little bit more confident, whatever, that's going to rub off. And the same exact way, the inverse works as well. And there's a lot of people who are like, I want to ruin somebody's day today. And, so it's, for me, that's it, and then I know they're going to be a little bit nicer. They're going to be and that's like the thing that I absolutely just love so much.
That's great. That's so beautiful. It's the ripple effect, right? And what you describe is such a spiritually sound teaching and belief. It's like when we look to serve, when we look to give, it's just your field expands, the flow of energy, whether it's money or positivity or whatever opens up. And I think, again, when we look out at the world of, people building businesses, entrepreneurs, companies, corporate, whatever, there's a lot of what's in it for me and what am I going to get today? And that is such a squasher, I think, to the human spirit and to one's prosperity. So my question for you around this, was there a time where you were in that world of, okay, how am I going to make money? What's in it for me? Or were you sort of born enlightened? Like, did Chris just enter the world understanding he was here to serve?
No, I was definitely not born enlightened, and definitely not born with that thinking. And to be completely honest, I talk about this a lot. I spent the vast majority of my life thinking the opposite way and acting the opposite way. And what I mean by that is that I was always looking what's in it for me. And I was always so concerned about how things looked on the outside, and always so concerned about, what people thought of me and everything. So, and it really took, and I think as you've seen, I'm sure in your life and people you've worked with, like, many times it takes spiritual growth comes from lots of, there's a saying that the touchstone for all spiritual growth is pain. And I don't know if it's all spiritual growth, but because there's other ways, but for me, it's been a lot of times that I have to get in enough pain. This is much less so now, but this was the case for me for most of my life, where in order to change, that I needed to be in, or something had to happen. And one of the big thing that happened to me about 5 years ago was a company that I'd started maybe about 8 years ago. And it was around 3 years old at that time. I was one of the co-founders of this company. It had grown to like 100 people, and it looked really good on the outside. Everything looked really perfect, and it was a complete mess on the inside. And very similar to me, in it was like a perfect analogy. And that company just like completely imploded almost exactly 5 years ago.
Wow.
And I lost pretty much all my money, and like all these, like publicly, all these things just happened. And it was like if I had said, all right, Kisma, here's all the worst things that can happen to me in business, they all pretty much happened. And it was one of those things where it was just like, it didn't feel like it at the time. And this is what often happens, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me to just reevaluate my entire life. And, I had this moment, I can share this story with you, but I had this moment where it was like a Saturday afternoon. I was home and watching my daughter. I was on a phone call while all this stuff is going on. It was like the most important call in the world, which I have no idea who I was talking to or what was it. And my daughter, who was 3 years old at the time, my daughter Vivian, who was like, if you asked me like, who's the most important person in your life, I would say Vivian. Now, I did not act that way, though. Yeah. I would say that, and I felt that, but I did not act that way. And I'm sure I did not make her feel that way. And she'd walked into the kitchen, and I'm on this call, and she goes to ask me something. I just say, 1 minute. She knew that 1 minute was like 20 minutes. It's not going to happen right then. And so she goes over, hungry. She walks over to the refrigerator, opens up the refrigerator. I'm kind of watching her out of the side of my eye. And while I'm on this call, and she looks at me again like, really? You're not going to do anything? She's 3 years old. And she takes out her piece of pizza, gets a plate, pushes a chair up to the microwave, starts cooking her own dinner. And in that moment, I just realized, I was like, wow, and there's probably 100 times something like that had happened. But for whatever reason, at that exact moment, I just realized, all right, I have to change everything about my life. And it just was one of those things. I always say, like, some people have like a burning bush moment or a white light experience. Mine was a piece of pizza, And I started to change, and I focused on becoming a much healthier person, but I also focused so much on connecting and giving. And you mentioned like Unfair Advantage, which we were just both at last week. And that event, which is, people think it's around the media and growing their media presence, everything, but it's really about connecting and figuring out how you can create win-win partnerships in all aspects of your life. And that was born out of at that moment, one of the things that I said I was going to start doing and made a promise, and I'm very good about keeping myself accountable, but I said I'm going to start meeting with somebody every single day for, every day, no matter what. And there's only two rules. I have to, meet with somebody each day. The first rule was be honest and open and vulnerable about wherever you're at, and don't try to hide behind being perfect or anything like that. That was the first rule. The second rule was don't go in it looking for anything for yourself. And everything started to center around this question, which I start everything I do out with. And the question is, what do you need help with right now? Now, I never ask somebody that directly, but that's what I'm always trying to figure out. What do you need help with right now?
Oh, that's so good. This whole story gives me the chills because I think when there's another human involved, and especially a child, and we have this, revelation and realization like, holy cow, something is upside down and I better get it right side up fast. Just a further question about this. So the business went sideways. Money was lost. I'm sure there were people that you had trusted, probably that you realized you couldn't. There was that defining moment. I got that, like, okay, things have to change. Then what did you do? Did you hibernate? Did you like go to a spa? Did you climb a mountain? Like, what was the trek back up?
Yeah. So the first thing, I had no idea what I wanted to actually do with my life. And which is so weird saying this now, but the only thing that I knew was what I didn't want to do. And that's what I had been doing. So I'm talking about professionally. So I had no like clear plan, nothing. Like I just started just diving into everything. And, I really focused. So one of the books that I found around that time was Choose Yourself by James Altucher, which is weird because now he's like a friend of mine. We've been on the same stages and things like that. And, he lives in my neighborhood. But at that time, I had no idea who he was or anything. And he talked a lot about having a daily practice, a daily routine. And I really focused on, building good habits for myself. And some of these things I had been doing already, but which then led me. So it's as you know, my favorite quote is, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So then that led me to, I just started reading everything by him. But he mentioned something about the book called The Science of Getting Rich. And by Wallace D. Wattles, written in 19. I started reading, I read The Science of Getting Rich. I had to read it about 20 times in a row before it made any sense to me. And that book completely changed my life because I started to understand how powerful my mind was. And I never really understood it up until that point. And I really just started to focus on what am I putting into my body, my mind, and my soul. And, just really so combined with meeting people, combined with becoming healthier, mind, body, spirit, and all these things, and then just starting to trust, and I think that's the thing, just trusting that the universe has your back. And, it literally took me I had no idea how I was ever going to make another dollar. Forget $1 million or 10 million or anything. I just didn't know. It sounds crazy to me. And then one day, it was like September of that year. So say all this stuff happened in March. I was just like, all right, I'm ready. And, things just started happening and they've continued to just unfold. And by just becoming trying to become a better person and just understanding and surrounding myself with really, really good people. And that's so important. And I talk about this. And it's funny because it all kind of converges in what I do now. I didn't know that at the time. You have to just be able to trust. And I think that that's an important thing for people to understand because sometimes it seems really hard to want to trust anything, especially if things aren't going well for you or you're in a valley of your life. But it's so important to just be able to keep moving forward and having that faith and that trust and that hope.
Oh, yeah. I so love that. And Wallace Wattles, I mean, those books written back then, the energy was so different. I'm a big fan of Florence Scovel Shinn and Catherine Ponder.
My favorite.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just and once, we're not taught this in schools. No one tells except for the evolved parents, but no one's telling our kindergartners or first graders, hey, there actually is this substance that makes up the universe and it's in you too. And you don't have to be in a box and there's enough for everyone. It's just such a different message. And I do feel like we're trying to get back there. And there are some interruptions, as we can see on the planet, in our country and other countries. And what I love about you is you have this positivity. I mean, I'm pretty positive, but you way out positive me. It's really astounding. So, the work, the reading, definitely I see this chunk of time where you went inward, the introspection. So what is your daily routine aside from serving a person every day? What else do you do to stay in that positive track?
Sure. So I'll tell you exactly what it is. And this is an important thing because I know exactly what it is that I need to do each day in order to be at my best. Now, I don't always do it 100%, and I'm not perfect at any of this stuff, and nobody is. And I think that's such an important thing. And I always make sure that I say that because I just don't like when people like come across as like, oh, it's always perfect. I'm always great. Like but I do know, and that's like one of the things for me. One of the big realizations was I used to fight against structure my whole life. Like I never wanted to be a conformist or anything. So I thought that by not having any structure, having any routine, that it was really cool. And what I found is that structure gives me freedom.
Yes.
Because what happens is that if I know the things that I need to do in order to be at my best, and I do those, it removes any of the thinking. It removes any of like the choice, the going back and forth or not knowing or anything. So I have a routine, and I'm big, huge morning guy. So I wake up early. I wake up typically 5 o'clock. It can be anywhere from 4:30 to 5:30. I always set an alarm, and I always wake up. So I never hit the snooze button. That's the first thing. I get out of bed and I say, today's going to be the best day ever. Now, I don't always feel that way, but it's the first words out of my mouth no matter what. And then I say some quick prayers, and whatever your belief is, I believe, very strongly that there's something much greater than me, because if I'm all there is and I'm all there I can rely on, I'm in trouble. So believe it or not, I make my bed. I read a chapter of a book every morning. And I'm almost all the books that I read are, for the most part, older. So you mentioned Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It is one of my favorite books of all time. I can give you there's like 5 books. If you read these 5 books, your life will be changed forever. And I can give those right before we're done.
Yeah, great.
Chapter of a book every morning. I say some things out loud. I write 2 gratitude lists. One that I'm grateful for today, and one that, whatever I just think about the last 24 hours. So tomorrow morning, this call, our podcast, will be on my gratitude list. And then I do one for what I'm grateful for, the things that haven't happened yet, but I know are going to. So I'm grateful in advance. And then I take a picture of the first one and I text it to one of my best friends. I meditate. And then I write out a daily plan, and I write it all out just by the half-hour increments based on. And the daily plan is for when I don't do that typically on the weekends but if like today, I just wrote it all out, 8:30 to 9 to 9:30, and I like writing it all out in these half-hour increments, and I don't like using a pre-written, pre-filled out journal because I want to show myself how much time I actually have that day. And that's all done in the morning before I check Facebook, do anything. And then I just do my MIT, my most important task. So I'll spend a half hour on whatever is most important for me that day. And then I exercise 5 times a week. Doesn't matter what day or where or when, but I just do it 5 times. I meet with somebody every day. I floss my teeth before I go to bed. I say some prayers, and then I turn over a request to my subconscious mind.
Oh, so great. Everyone, re-listen to that segment again. It's perfect. And I think one really vital component is that before you turn on Facebook or Instagram or the news, you have put into your being precious information. And I think what many people are doing is you wake up, it's like, oh, what's on the news, Facebook, turn on, and humans don't always realize what that is doing. Like you mentioned, the subconscious mind. It's like impress again and again, something that could be negative or just not worthy of our soul or our spirit. And I know when people make that decision to put in something so precious, their day is way different.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to give you the 5, 6 books I mentioned. Choose Yourself. That one, if you're at like kind of a crossroads, that I highly recommend. Okay. These books, though, I'm going to just share with your audience.
Great. So, we'll put links in the show notes too, guys.
The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. That's my all-time ultimate favorite. 100 pages that will change your life. Read it over and over. The Game of Life and How to Play It. You mentioned Florence Scovel Shinn. It was written in like 1926. Like my favorite part about that. is that she was a woman in the 1920s. If you read it with that lens, it makes it even more
exactly.
Like it's so cool. Resurrection by Neville Goddard. It's not as well known of his stuff, but it's just so amazing. The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, which you can also listen to instead. If you just go to YouTube and type in The Strangest Secret, it like basically has such an amazing voice. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy, and The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz.
Great.
Those will just change. Like if you read those, like you cannot be the same person.
Yeah.
I know I wasn't.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. We'll make sure the links are in there. I love that. All of those that you mentioned. The magic, what was the last one? The Magic of Thinking Big?
The Magic of Thinking Big.
I've not yet read that. I will definitely get that. Oh, really? So what does Chris ever get mad? And what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely do. I think the biggest thing though is by doing all of these things, it makes it very hard to. So I'll get annoyed. I don't know if I really get mad, because one of the things that I realized is that I can't really judge what's good or bad. So what I mean by that is, like, I gave you that example of everything that happened with that company. Now, it'd be really easy for me to judge that as bad. That turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. So what I've realized is that something, like, there's always a reason for something to happen. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. So, like, my dog the other day ate a pound of chocolate.
I saw that, Tammy.
And, and it completely, like, so I could get mad and be like, oh my God, like, because anger usually comes from fear or, something like that. Or thinking, like, I had to reschedule everything, and it was already like a very hectic week and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But there's nothing to get, like, angry or to like, there's nothing that's going to do. So it's just important for me to look and then be like, all right, let me be more thankful for her. Let me be thankful that I live in New York City. I can run her to a vet that's close. I can find one that's like 0.3 miles away, that I have money, even though I should have gotten health insurance for her. Duh. Maybe this is a reminder, but it doesn't matter. Like, I have, I can easily pay for all these different things and appreciate her more afterwards, and all this stuff. So it's just like, it's one of those things. Or with people, like, the reminder of, like, things happen and, people are, there's a lot of anger.
Yeah. Hashtag humans.
Like, right. And remembering that, like, hurt people. It's not just, that type of thing.
I know. We had a really interesting, I had an interesting year with some occurrences that I wouldn't have expected. And I asked myself, like, what did I do to attract this? Not in a judging way, but just like, whoa, this is fascinating. Never in a million years when I thought I'd be dealing with this, or that this would have happened. So what did I do? And I think when it's asked from, like, a real sense of curiosity, we get some really cool answers, right? It doesn't have to be shame or guilt or judgment. It's just like, wow, life is fascinating. What did I do to attract it? And what do I do to navigate it?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's, it just, it involves removing our ego.
Right.
Being okay with that, and being okay with whatever, like, that maybe there was stuff that you did to attract it, maybe, and, like, being okay with that. And, like, that was another big thing. Like, I never wanted to be wrong. I never wanted to not know or appear to not know something, and now, like, I absolutely love not knowing things, because again, like, if I'm all there is, like, I'm in trouble. Like,
that's so great.
That's simple. And it's such a good reminder for me.
I love that. I'm glad you mentioned too earlier about sometimes the breakthrough will come from a situation that is painful. I often look at the struggle. I know there's a lot of teachers out there like ease and flow. And I often believe, maybe it's from my musician days, but we gotta work. Like, the struggle builds resiliency, and it's how one can maintain their own personality, their spirit through the struggle and make it easy for them. So it's sort of like when I was a musician, we would have this saying like, oh, that's a really hard lick. Make it sound easy. And then I had a teacher show up and he's like, no, it's a really hard lick. Make it sound hard for everybody else, but easy for you. And I was like, dude, that's the key. So ease and flow can really just be a perception and an attitude, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, as I mentioned, so I go through less pain and less struggle now, but they are not removed from my life. Like this week was a great example. Like I keep thinking that I will just get to that point where there'll be zero struggle. There'll be zero. But I realize that if that's the case, then it makes you appreciate the other side so much. And this week was super challenging, and last week was super amazing and easy and flow. And I had my event, and the event was perfect, and like the energy was so amazing. I offer a program completely sold out, like immediately, like went away, like all these amazing things. And then like this week I came and like, life just showed up in different ways.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And I think that the only difference for me now is that I spend less time in the struggle, and I spend less time in the unnecessary struggle or the unnecessary pain that I cause by judging it.
Right. Yes. And because when we judge it, then we get entangled in it, and then we're attached to whatever the outcome. And it's just, I'm watching the Olympics and I'm watching how these athletes navigate, whether it's ice or slopes or whatever. And it's like life, how we perceive and navigate. And it can actually be a lot of fun sometimes when those interesting weeks show up. But I did want to ask you, having been at your event, which was amazing, and Chris does attract really great humans, what is it like for you post-event? Are you kind of like, I can't believe it's over? You put so much energy to it. Do you find that you kind of sink a little bit, or do you even notice?
When I'm done with that, I am really tired because it's just because everything that I do with it is based on more of intuition than anything. Like I have a great team and that helps with all the details and all the speak, but like everything that I'm doing is based on that day. And so I give it like every single thing that I have. And it's just the thing about something with the unfair advantage of what is with that community is it's just such the energy. I've never seen energy and goodwill for each other that in anything. And that has like, it sounds very like arrogant to say that, but it's insane. So I feel I'm so charged up and so fired up just from being there and being around all these people. And it just, so honestly, like if that was like, 5 days, 10 days, I would be completely fired up the entire time. It's crazy.
Yeah, you really thrive in the energy of that. It's so cool to see. What is on the horizon for you professionally, or are you just one day at a time?
So the unfair advantage is such a big part of what I'm doing. So I made this big commitment to live events and to doing, because that's where I see, for me, that's where I get the most value. It's where I see that I'm able to help people just really transform. And so I'm doing the Unfair Advantage live every quarter. So the next one is May 2nd and 3rd. And we always do them in New York City because that's where all the media is, all the influencers. Because what it is, as you know from being there, it's teaching people how to do the stuff that I've always built my businesses and different things around relationships and also publicity. So it's around showing people how to do what I've done, but also learning from other experts, people who know, more than me. So, and then I bring in all the different people from the media, like editor-in-chiefs and producers and all these just amazing people that are like impossible to get in touch with nowadays. Bring all them in at night, and then you see it just like people are people. They're all real people. Just build relationships, connect with them. So I'm doing that every quarter. Next one's May 2nd and 3rd. And as you know, we curate that. It's not just something where people can buy tickets. It's because I want to make sure it's the right people. So I make it kind of not difficult, but way harder on myself than I need it to be. But it's really important because like knowing that the people are so great, it creates such a safe space, and it allows people to be really vulnerable and really open with where they're at. And so that's one big part. And then I launched a program around that, like an accelerator type of program where I just hired this amazing PR director. I got her she was working at a agency where it was just kind of soul crushing, and I got her to leave there, and she's helping me run this program, and I have some other great people in there. So my goal is just around to helping people to create better real life connections. Connections. It doesn't even it's real connections in their lives. And so I'm writing a book like around all this stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Doing constantly doing like interviews on TV. I left to do an NBC News interview in the middle of my event the other day. I want to just get people to connect more and to create more real connections.
Yeah. I refer to you to people that don't know you. I say he's like this omnipresent entrepreneur. Like you are everywhere. He's on TV. He's like on Facebook. He's writing articles. He's doing live events. I kind of feel like you need a reality show, like even if it's just 48 hours in the life of Chris, it is, it's a really, really special. There was something I wanted to ask, because you have this beautiful daughter, Vivian. Is that correct?
Yes,
is that her? Oh,
Vivian.
I saw her face and it's just like so sweet. And we're recording this podcast after a very interesting time, as we're seeing some excruciatingly unfortunate situations in our country with schools and guns. And my daughter's 23, and what I've always appreciated about you always ask, how's your daughter? And you connected me to someone to help me get her a flat in New York City when she started Columbia. For you, being a father of a younger child, what's it feel like? I mean, what are the conversations you're having with her or her teachers? Or are you just determined to be like, she's safe, she's protected?
Yeah. And whether that's, people could think of that as being ignorant, but I try to focus on what can I do to make a difference? And, focusing on like trying to like sit her down and have a conversation that would scare her is not going to make the right difference in her life. And so for me, it's really important. Like I always believe, and this can be completely, I just don't believe in like trying to have that conversation around that's going to scare her. And, for her, because there's nothing that's going to do that I can do other than try to make changes. And where I can make the biggest change and where she can make the biggest change is by trying to do what we do best in terms of connecting people, in terms of trying to have, create better communication. And that's not going to remove guns from the world. I get that. But what it can do is, for me, is being able to help people. I think about like, where does a lot of this stuff come from? Is like people being in so much pain and torment. And, whether it's like from the mental health side or whether it's from being bullied or disenfranchised or whatever. But, I just look back at my own, child, and I think about that. And, so that's like it's so much about trying to make sure that you can be a better person, and, try to raise up the people around you. And, then outside of that, then I can do whatever I think is going to have the biggest impact, whether that's with money, whether that's with connecting people or, but that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, that's great. I love that approach, and lead by example, which you do for her. I know. I think, I remember one of my trips to India, Swami Parthasarathi is a great teacher of mine, and people started asking about children, and he's like, stop asking your kids questions and just lead by example. And I was like, oh, that's so good. And I came home from that trip, and Zoe was like, she was maybe 13, and I picked her up from school, and I so wanted to be like, who'd you eat lunch with? What was class like? Da, da, da. And I just shut my mouth. And I kept driving, and 5 minutes in, she's like, "So Mom, how was your day?" And I was like, "It works."
Yeah.
Just ask fewer questions and be present. Yeah, that's so cool. Before we sign off, I have this question I love to ask guests, and that is there anything you really, really want to do in your life that you've yet to tell anybody about?
Well, I mentioned the book,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think so, because I think I'm very good about sharing things
Mm-hmm.
with people. Try to be as much of an open book
You
as
pretty
possible.
much are, yeah. You don't want to be in a movie or like, have you gone skydiving or bungee jumping? Or
The good thing is there's nothing that I can think of, and that makes me happy to say.
That's pretty cool.
Because I would completely share it if there was, but there's and that's just because I haven't discovered it yet, or it hasn't been planted in my mind yet. And so that could completely change in 15 minutes from now. And that's like the cool thing, is that I get to connect and be around so many great people that my life can change completely, or a book can change. As I said, like when I said, like, if you read those books, your life, like, that's because I know my life changed from books, like, and from meeting people. And that's why I also, like, I don't do like super detailed, like 1-year plans or anything like that, because I'll meet more people this month that, will wind up probably having a huge impact. Like, I didn't know you a year ago, and those types of things. So
yeah, that's really cool. Is there any mentor that you've had during your lifetime that you've really treasured?
Yeah, my mentor, a guy named Scott Largay, he's a guy who completely changed my life probably about 6 years ago. He not in the business that I'm in or anything like that. He owns and manages a bunch of like high-end car dealerships in Florida. But Scott is the one who taught me about gratitude lists. And the first time we had dinner, he said, "I want you to text me 3 things you're grateful for tomorrow morning, and I'm going to do the same for you." And that started the gratitude habit. And then he also taught me something that completely changed my life, where he said, "You have a responsibility to be a better person." And it had never been something I'd considered or thought about. And he didn't say that to me directly. I just heard him saying that, and that was what attracted me to him. So yeah, that's the person who changed my life.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And as well, is there anything that we can do for you, our listeners, myself? What is it that you need support on?
The biggest thing is I do every single day. My team had given me a challenge to do a Facebook Live for 30 days. And I took the challenge. And after about day 2 or 3, I said, "I'm going to do this for the rest of the year." And I've done it every single day for the last 39 days. And I plan on doing it for at least whatever the next 320 something days, at least. And I do it right on my personal page. Most of the time, I don't think it through too big or anything. And so I'm on Facebook, Chris Winfield. So facebook.com/Chris Winfield, ChrisWinfield. Join me, participate in the Facebook Lives. I really enjoy doing it. The other thing is, if you or somebody you know might be a good fit for our Unfair Advantage or Kismet, if there's somebody that you know who that's what I rely heavily on, is the referrals to make sure that I have the right people there.
Right. Yeah. I'll get a link from your team and put it in the show notes for that. And definitely, listeners, you want to go and follow Chris on his profile page, listen to the Facebook Lives. They're just full of gems. It's so cool, Chris, to see you as, I know this word is used a lot, authentic, but I do feel like you're embracing being human, and that full potential is so present in you. So I just want to say I'm grateful for you.
I'm so grateful for you. And it kind of amazes me that I haven't only known you for less than a year, because you're one of those people I feel like I've known you for so long, and I say that in such a good way. And because you've had an impact on my life, and I really just really appreciate and I'm grateful for you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Check out Chris. I'll put a list of his books in the show notes. Give him a Google too, because you'll be surprised some of the other gems that maybe we missed that'll show up on that. And any last words of wisdom for our listeners, Chris?
I would just say, just try to be true to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds corny, but I think that it's such an important thing. And just my biggest lesson from 2017 was trust my intuition. And it's been something I've really carried over into this year. And it comes up many times a week for me in different things, and just like trust that feeling in your gut, that feeling in your heart where you know something's right or wrong. It's almost always, I feel like it's almost always right. So trust that more.
I love that. All right. Thanks so much for being here. And to all of our listeners, much love and a very heartfelt namaste. Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.